Elation and jubilation, gamers from all around the world. I am Lucian and this is the World Gamer Show. And today we're going to talk about
Resident Evil.
once again, because if you've been following my channel even just a little, you might know that I love everything related to Resident Evil. With the Mercenaries mode finally coming home in Resident Evil Village, the 8th chapter in the long-running franchise of survival horror games, I thought this is the best time to go down the history lane and retrace the evolutionary steps of this fan-favorite mode, which has changed a lot through the years. So without further ado, let's get started.
Resident Evil, the Mercenaries.
The Mercenaries is an extra mode that allows the players to fight against waves of monsters under a certain time limit. It is a score-based mode, which allows immense replayability and incredible speedruns. It first appeared in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, released originally in 1999 on the first PlayStation. However, before getting into more details, I feel it's important to mention that the true origins can be traced even earlier than this. In fact, the Mercenary is not the first extra battle mode in an RE game. The first is actually the battle game for the Sega Saturn version of the first Resident Evil, released in 1997. It's unlocked after beating the game or through the input of a cheat code. It puts you again in the shoes of either Chris or Jill, depending on your save file, and against waves after waves of enemies. You advance through the stages after clearing all the rooms from all the enemies, and you get the chance to refill your stock through save rooms in between levels. Also included are exclusive enemies like the now infamous zombie Wesker and the Golden Tyrant. It was a neat addition and further increased the longevity of the game, and at the time of this video it is still a mode completely exclusive to the Saturn version. If you're interested, I did a full review of RE1, which you can find right now on your screen and through the links in the description. But in this case I decided to take a look at its Japanese DualShock edition, which hardly anybody covered. This version is notable for including a bonus disc with many videos from the cut content of the infamous Resident Evil 1.5, the prototype version of what would later become Resident Evil 2. Speaking of which, when the final version of RE2 was released in 1998, again on the original PlayStation, it came packed with loads of secrets, including extra modes like the Fourth Survivor, which puts you in the role of Umbrella Agent Hunk, who needed to traverse the zombie-infested Raccoon City and reach the heliport, and Salvation. The funniest part is that this side story is actually canon to the main plot, as Hank is the one who managed to retrieve a sample of the G virus. This mode was incredibly difficult too, a real challenge, which difficulty will be further increased when unlocking the even more infamous Tofu Survivor. There are certain conditions to unlock these modes, which can be easily found through the internet. However, just like the original Resident Evil before it, Resident Evil 2 also got a re-release on PlayStation, called DualShock Edition. Not only did it include the DualShock analog support, but most importantly, included the Extreme Battle mode, which is the closest we get to the Mercenaries mode from RE3 before RE3. In fact, you can choose between different characters, with each one having different equipment. The objective here is to retrieve some bombs to eradicate the zombie menace. But of course it's easier said than done, with tons of enemies standing in your way. As you progress, you unlock more difficulties and characters, including fan favorite Chris, which is notable because he uses a different and updated character model than that of RE1. It's a shame that this mode didn't make it to the RE2 remake, but we still got the Ghost Survivors, and with Hunk and Tofu still there, that game was so packed with content to begin with that I didn't miss it too much anyway. We finally reached the first iteration of the Mercenaries with Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. However, it is quite different compared to the more recent entries. This mode is unlocked once you beat the main adventure and allows you to play as one of the 3 Umbrella mercenaries from the main story: Carlos, who was also briefly playable in the story mode, and Mikhail and Nikolai, the other 2 exclusive characters who were only playable in this mode. Each character has a specific set of items and weapons, which basically dictated the difficulty. Carlos is the well-balanced guy, ideal for beginners with enough weapons and healing items. Personally, I prefer Mikhail, as he is the most heavily armed, with even a rocket launcher perfect for dealing with the nemesis you will find. Yes, in the Mercenaries you can even find more than one, and at the same time. Nikolai is definitely the most challenging one to play as, since he is only armed with a handgun, with no extra bullets, and a knife. But has a lot of aid sprays, so at least there's that. The early incarnation of the Mercenaries even had some sort of what-if plot. In fact, the full name of this mode is the Mercenaries Operation Mad Jackal. Basically,
in order to dispose of the bomb implanted in your body, you must reach the target point. Keep in mind that there will be various obstacles in your way.
Not unlike Hunk in RE2. The more arcade nature of this mode is soon revealed though, as you can gather more seconds, which will be added to your timer, whenever you manage to kill a monster, dodge some enemies, and rescue other survivors. It has a pretty frantic pace, oh, and the music playing in the background is epic as hell. A difference compared with the later iterations of this mode is that there aren't really any stages here. It is one big continuous portion of Raccoon City. The best part though is that once you complete it, you earn money which can be spent to get some badass bonuses from the main game. One more incentive to keep playing this wonderful mode, which even in its infancy had a lot to offer. If you want to know more about RE3, I've covered it too in my review, which you can find, as usual, right now on your screen and through the links in the description. The next iteration of the Mercenaries wouldn't happen until Resident Evil 4. Yes, we had to wait 6 long years. But before that, we had another little game called Resident Evil Code Veronica, released in the year 2000, which aside from being one of the best chapters in the series, also included an extra mode called Battle Game. Why didn't they just call it Mercenaries? Well, because these are the same people who worked on the RE1 port of the Saturn, which, if you have some decent short-term memory, we've already mentioned earlier for including the original exclusive battle game. So yes, these aren't the same people that worked on RE3, so they just wanted to get on with their own extra mode rather than the Mercenaries. This new battle game plays like a mix between the Mercenaries in RE3 and the original battle game from RE1 for Saturn. In fact, you have as usual many characters to choose from, and there is only one continuous stage. You can unlock many rewards as usual, like special weapons and more characters, including a certain Wesker playable for the first time ever. But the most standout feature is surely the fact that you can play this mode in first person, thanks to the environment rendered in real 3D, another first for the series. step in the evolution of the Mercenaries is a big one, and basically made it much closer to how we see it today. I'm talking about its appearance in the seminal Resident Evil 4, released in 2005. Again, unlocked after beating the main game once, this new Mercenaries was better and bigger than ever. This time, no real plot necessary, further leaning on its pure arcade nature. Also, you don't really play as the Mercenaries anymore. This extra mode was called this way because in the original RE3 you would indeed play as the 3 mercenaries from the main story. But here those characters are no longer present, and the characters that are present certainly are not mercenaries, or at least not all of them. I guess the name can still fit because, in the end, the characters you play as still fight for points and to reach a high score, so in a certain way they can still be considered as mercenaries, I guess. I don't really know, let's just get on with it. This time you don't need to traverse a town or anything, you're simply let free on a big arena and you need to survive until the timer runs out. Of course, it's not that simple. The places are crawling with monsters, which upon kill will give you points. The more you kill repeatedly, the more points you get, especially if you manage to stack up combos. On the area there are also some bonus that will allow you to either multiply your combos or even get more seconds added to your timer. And you want them, because the more time you have, the more chances you get to get more points and unlock the many prizes, including as usual more weapons and characters. This time though, the characters at your disposal play radically different, more than ever before. And not just depending on the equipment, but also on many other variables including speed and set of melee moves. First we have Leon, the main protagonist of RE4, who is also the only one unlocked by default. Playing well through the stages, you unlock more characters, which will be also added to the main screen, a neat detail in my opinion. Then there is Ada, with her dress from RE2, Hunk, who has an incredible one-kill move, Wesker, cooler than ever with his superhuman strength, and Krauser, with his special ability to transform his arm and his exclusive weapon, the bow. Also the enemies are taken from the main game, of course, including some big guys that can be considered as mini-bosses, which will also grant you more points if defeated. As I previously mentioned, there are many arenas in here, including the village of course, the castle, the fort, and the new area exclusive to this minigame, the dock. Each level has its high grounds, low grounds, shortcuts, and hidden areas that allows lateral thinking and developing of strategies to keep that combo counter sky high. This is the true Mercenaries mode, and the fans loved it, so much so that it came back almost untouched in its mechanics in Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5, released in 2009. Now, I'm not the biggest RE5 fan admittedly, but I will admit that it's a fun game, and the Mercenaries is also no less than fun. There is not too much to talk about here because, again, its mechanics are untouched, so I will just run through the different characters and stages. We of course have the two protagonists, Chris and Sheva, and then we have Jill and Wesker. Wesker has the most unique playstyle with his ability to run lightning fast. That aside though, I'm quite disappointed with the lack of characters here. Only 4, when even its predecessor had 5. At least though, the stages have increased in number, as we now have 8, including as usual one exclusive level, which is not based on the campaign. But that doesn't change the fact that you can play this with only 4 characters. A little too little. Well anyway, fans must have felt the same way because with the re-release of RE5, dubbed Gold Edition, released the following year, they included the Mercenaries Reunion, which addresses this one complaint and included many more characters. Among the new ones, we have the offensively sexy Excella, the reliable Josh, and the evergreen veterans Barry Burton and Rebecca Chambers, straight from RE1. And if you're wondering where the heck are Jill and Wesker, well, they weren't included in this mode. For this, we needed to wait yet another re-release in 2016 with the Mercenaries United, which indeed united the whole cast of the two previous modes. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Also included was a No Mercy mode, which would crank up the difficulty to 11 by allowing many more enemies on screen thanks to the added power of the newer consoles. However, I've left the most defining feature of this iteration of Mercenaries for last, and it is the same feature that indeed defined the whole RE5 experience: co-op. Yes, finally you can play with friends both online and couch co-op with split screen. This feature alone made it so much better and enjoyable. On top of that, you could finally share your high scores online. This was the next step in the Mercenary series. By the end of the 2000s, 2010-ish, the Mercenaries mode had established itself as an integral part of every Resident Evil title. But you know what they say, too much of a good thing is still too much. So at Capcom thought it would be a great idea to release a Resident Evil game solely dedicated to this side mode. And they thought to release it for the newest and hottest handled console at the time, the Nintendo 3DS.
Resident Evil, the Mercenaries 3D.
Of course, being a full game, it contained more stages and characters than the previous iterations, but not so many more. That said, there are some features that stand out compared to the rest of the series. First, back is the first-person mode, but only for aiming. In theory, it would allow more precision aiming, but in practicality, I've always played with the aim in third person as usual, because it allows me to have a better perception of my surroundings, and the constant swapping between first and third person was confusing and getting on my nerves anyway. Also, there is a skill system available, which allows your characters to grow by attaching some passive skills. Speaking of characters, this time we have Chris, Jill, Wesker, Claire, Barry, Rebecca, Honk, and Krauser, fighting in 8 maps taken from both RE4 and 5. Missing anyone? A certain Leon S. Kennedy, maybe? On a brighter note, carried over from RE5 is the excellent co-op mode. This time, of course, only via Wi-Fi, due to the inherent limitations of a portable console. Again, there was no story or plot to speak of. It was definitely a gameplay-driven experience, more of a showcase of what the 3DS could do. This also served as a base for the indecent Resident Evil Mercenaries Versus for iOS, with bare-bone content, like only 3 characters available by default: Chris, Jill, and Wesker. Well, anyway, back to the 3DS. Mercenaries 3D would also allow Capcom to develop some confidence for the then newest spin-off in the Resident Evil series, called Revelations, with a demo that was also included in the Mercenaries 3D as a bonus, and most importantly, to help driving sales. Many fans felt that this Mercenaries game was basically the mode that would have gone packed with the newest Revelations, but removed and sold separately. While this was a reasonable assumption, considering that Capcom was really greedy at the time, this quite didn't turn out to be the case. Resident Evil Revelations was released in 2012, still on 3DS, and later ported to all other major consoles. It didn't include a Mercenaries mode, predictably, but it instead included a raid mode. This quieted the rumors that Capcom had thought about taking off the Mercenaries mode from Revelations to sell it separately, since we got something else entirely in its place. Raid mode allows the players to go alone or team up with others to clear the stages from enemies and reach the goal at the end. Contrary to the regular Mercenaries, here there is a huge emphasis put on characters' growth, so much so that Capcom implemented an experience system, similar to RPGs. The more enemies you kill, the more experience points you get, which in turn allows you to get better skills and equipments. This also means that the later stages need a better leveled up character. Enemies also now have health bars above their head to allow you to better understand the amount of damage you're dealing, just as if it was an action RPG. When Revelations was ported to other consoles, more characters and stages were added. This same mode, untouched in its mechanics, would also be brought over to Revelations 2 in 2015. The last iteration of the Mercenaries mode, before RE Village, appeared in 2012 with the release of the controversial Resident Evil 6. As I previously said, I don't consider myself a big RE5 fan, but you might be shocked to know that I actually enjoyed the Resident Evil 6 much more, as I felt that improved a lot of things over RE5, while of course not holding a candle to any of the previous main games. And Mercenaries is one of those things improved, which is directly linked to one of the things that were improved in the whole RE6 game, which is control. Your characters can now move while aiming and shooting, can dodge enemies and throw themselves to the ground while also being able to aim from that position. This allows you to better deal with anything that the game throws at you. Just like RE5, you can play co-op with a friend both online and in split screen, and you can also share your high scores online. If you linked your profile to the RE.net online portal, you could even unlock some extra costumes for your characters, including some hilarious pixelated renditions of classic and newer characters. Speaking of which, this is a decent cast. We have fan favorites like Leon, Chris, Ada, Sherry, a welcomed return, and some newcomers, some better than others admittedly, like Jake, whose background I wish was more expanded upon, and I do hope he makes a return eventually. We have Pierce, Elena, Carla, and the Agent. The arenas are so plentiful, with 10 among urban environments, catacombs and mines. Also present in subsequential re-releases, the No Mercy mode returning from RE5. But after RE6, silence. Many were expecting it to make a triumphant return on the remake of RE3, after all, the original was where it all started, so it would have only made sense for the Mercenaries to make a return as well, with an expanded roster and better defined mechanics maybe. But nothing. Mercenaries got the axe, along with many other contents from the original RE3. We got the online game Resistance instead, which was definitely no Mercenaries. Indeed, we wouldn't see it for 9 long years, until now, with the release of Resident Evil Village, which is very surprising, because with the inclusion of the multiplayer game RE-verse, we all thought that that game would be the sort of extra mode, and that it will be what Resistance was to the remake of RE3, a replacement. Instead, not only we get a nice extra online game, but also the Mercenaries. And the Mercenaries mode here is all new, taking yet another different incarnation with different rules than before. While the main goal is still achieving a high score by killing enemies on a time limit, now the player will need to kill all the enemies to clear a stage and be able to proceed to the next one. In between levels, the players will also be able to buy supplies from the Duke himself. You can buy healing items, weapons, or even upgrade the weapons you already have. Scattered throughout the levels are also these glowing orbs that once destroyed will allow you to choose between 3 temporary upgrades, like better guns damage or better speed for your character. Also, just like the raid mode from the Revelation series, each enemy will have a visible health bar on top of them, and you will be able to see the damage you inflict to them, so it seems like this Mercenaries wants to take the best of both worlds and combine the frenzy of the classic Mercenaries with the RPG elements of the raid mode, which is totally fine by me. It's an interesting take on the formula, a natural evolution that reminds us of how this mode have changed, from its first steps of infancy until what it has become today, with its ups and downs. I know of many fans that kept on playing the likes of RE3 and 4 not only for its excellent campaign, but to achieve a higher and higher score with incredibly talented players like Smallville CS, check out his channel, that still set new records even to this day. And there are many more like him. I mean, even RE5 and 6 offered a good time with their co-op Mercenaries battles. My point is, Resident Evil wouldn't be the same without the Mercenaries mode. And whenever there was a chapter released without it, it felt like something was missing. Well, this has now been addressed with the release of RE Village. The Mercenaries have finally come home. Thank you guys for watching this video to the end. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. Since you're there, why don't you share some of your memories playing the Mercenaries? Which game did you play it on the most? Which was your favorite incarnation? Are you excited about its comeback in Resident Evil 8? Drop me a comment, and if you feel like doing it, maybe also like and share the video around. It really does help. I made many videos about Resident Evil, so it might also be a good idea to subscribe if you are into Resident Evil as much as I am. Well, that does it for today. Thanks again for watching. I will be seeing you in my next video, but until then, stay safe, play safe, world gamers.